good to go?
Yeah, I'm ready. What are we doing today?
There's a new AMD graphics card.
No. No. No!
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
Need a Windows or Office key but don't want to pay retail? MMORC.com has all the best deals and a sweet discount for BPS Customs viewers. Just head over to the site linked below and enter code BAN35 for 35% off your order total, meaning you could snag Windows 10 Home for under $10. Fill out your email and place your order, and then click the extract code button at the top of the page. From there, it's as easy as heading to your Windows activation settings and inputting your shiny new key. For more information, head to MMORC.com or check out the links below. I'll be honest with you guys. I've been sitting at this desk staring at this camera for over a half hour right now, trying to get these first few lines to make sense and to be applicable to the situation that everybody's in. And I can't do it. I keep having to stop and start and go back to the beginning of what exactly I'm trying to communicate here. It comes down to this. Things suck. And I know it. Before I was a reviewer, I was a consumer, just like you guys are out there right now, who just want to give somebody money in exchange for a product and then use that product for its intended purpose. And even though now my job is to be a reviewer, I remain a consumer. And I don't get everything that I need for the channel. I have to go out and buy it a lot of the time. And over the past 6 months, I have resorted to having to pay double or more for a lot of components, not just graphics cards, power supplies, CPUs, other things. So as much as I can say that I understand how you guys feel, I know that it might come off as disingenuous because I'm in a better position. And that's, I guess, true. But I've been there. I continue to be there. I get it. And I'm very, very sorry. And I wish there was something that I could do about the unfortunate availability or the lack of availability of these things on the table in front of me. But they keep getting released for some reason. AMD and Nvidia keep coming out with new products. So as they show up here in the office, I do want to put out content about them because at some point in the future, this content will be relevant. And I hope that's sooner than later, but we never really know. And I'm gonna continue to make videos on this channel regarding graphics cards, PCs, builds, and things like that. And I hope that you guys stick around. And if you like this kind of stuff, make sure you get subscribed, hit that like button, follow me on Twitter, all the usual YouTube stuff. It definitely helps drive the algorithm and it supports the channel. But just like a lot of other reviewers right now, I am struggling with what kind of content to make about these products because usually there's a new GPU launch or a new CPU launch and you run a bunch of benchmarks and you show a bunch of slides and you play some cool techno music and then that's a video and there you go, wrap it up and send that out on the YouTube interwebs. But that doesn't really fly right now. If I did that kind of a video, I don't think I'd get any views and nobody would care. And again, it's understandable. I don't blame you guys for that at all. So we're gonna take a little bit of a different angle here, and I hope that it is something that is applicable in a more broad sense. We're gonna compare what a reference design graphics card does and how it performs versus an AIB graphics card, cooler, design, PCB. And we're gonna see what exactly you get for your extra money when you go with a non-reference board. Now, I myself have done this kind of content in the past, but it's been a little while, and I'd like to revisit these kinds of things every once in a while, just because it's certainly relevant to you guys, to your shopping experience, to the decisions that you make. Over here, we have AMD 6700 XT reference card. It comes in at a size of 267 by 110 by 40. It is a 2-fan design cooler, and it uses one 8-pin and one 6-pin PCIe. It's a strict 2-slot card. It's a really nice compact design, and I do like the aesthetic that AMD is using here. I do wish that they kind of move away from using this red trim because it limits what kind of builds you can do with this card, especially if you have it mounted in a traditional orientation. But overall, it's a pretty handsome product. It feels well built. And if you want more information on this cooler design itself, Steve from Gamers Nexus just did a full teardown where you can see all the guts. In this corner, we have Power Color's awesome looking Red Devil 6700 XT. Now, this is like the cream of the crop when it comes to AIB versions of these cards, and Power Color has been doing this now for a couple of generations. Their Red Devil AMD products have been awesome. Not only to look at, but usually they perform really well too. They're usually clocked up a little bit, and yes, they do draw a little more power, but it's usually worth it. So we're gonna see what exactly the differences are here, but as far as specs go, you're dealing with the exact same GPU, the exact same memory configuration, but the Power Color card is significantly larger. This is 320 by 130 by 50 millimeters. It uses 2 by 8 pin PCIe power connectors. It is a 2.5 slot graphics card, and it is quite a bit longer than the reference design. But it looks really, really cool, especially with all the lights on. You have this fin array at the back here that's made up entirely of LED diffusers that really casts a nice red glow, and then you have that red accent again spread across the card, the front of the card, and this really does make for a show-stopping build, especially if you were to mount it in some kind of vertical orientation. So while the AMD reference design is, like I said, pretty handsome, I think overall, aesthetically, I definitely have to give the win to the AIB version of the card. They just have more license to kind of do what they want with the design, whereas AMD is kind of building within certain constraints. And I think that Power Color really hit the nail on the head with this generation. These cards look great. So that's basic specs. But what about price? This is a $479 graphics card. Now, we're not going to talk value in the market versus its competition because, to be honest, I think it's overpriced. But that's not what we're really worried about here today. We're worried about value versus an AIB card. So how much is the Power Color version? I don't know. I reached out to Power Color and I asked them. They didn't send it over in the press deck, which they usually do. They didn't respond to my email yet, which, to be fair to them, I only sent a couple days ago. And I can't find any information online as far as what the MSRP of this card is supposed to be. Now, I don't know why that is. I don't know why they haven't published that information if they sent me this card for review. That's usually something they include. Is it because they know that this card just isn't going to be available at MSRP, so why give it one? That would be pretty shitty to do, but it's possible. If this card is only going to be available through third-party sellers, eBay and whatnot, then what difference does it make if this is $479 or $200 MSRP? Doesn't matter. This is going to be $1,000 on eBay, so who cares? But the point remains that likely this is going to be more expensive. Now, this is a premium version of this card, and as such, you would expect maybe $100 extra. So if we're talking $479, maybe this is $579. And at that point, you're in territory of much more powerful graphics cards. So do you get the extra value that you're paying for here? Well, let me just spoil the conclusion here. For this particular comparison, the answer is no. And I don't know what exactly happened because usually the high-end AIB cards do give you significant value, but this one kind of fell a little flat. So how do you go about doing a comparison like this where you have performance numbers that you can directly compare and say, you know, this card is better than that card? Well, the first thing I wanted to do was look into power, clock speeds, acoustics, and thermals. So what I did was I took Cyberpunk 2077, I opened it up, I ran it at 3840 by 2160, windowed, borderless, and then I overlaid GPU-Z with averages for clock speed, for thermals, and for power. Now, I'm gonna show you some footage here, and I apologize in advance. I don't know what happened, but this happened the last time that I used the capture hardware with AMD graphics cards. It seems to have recorded in some kind of HDR color mode, and as a result, things look really weird color-wise. So here's the footage. I apologize, the capture footage for this testing was all done in the same way, so just bear with me, but the results are valid. None of these cards were running in HDR mode at all. So with this GPU-Z overlay, I was able to capture over a half an hour the averages of clock speed, of temperature, of power draw, and then I used a sound meter to capture their acoustics. Here are the results, and this is kind of what you would expect from an AIB version of a card versus the reference design. It's going to run significantly cooler and quieter, but it's going to draw more power. I was definitely surprised though that the reference design maintained a higher overall clock speed. And then I wanted to capture a bunch of gameplay footage and put them side by side so you could see half the screen rendered on one of the card, half the screen rendered on the other card, and see the performance numbers in real time as they fluctuate with different parts of the scene. Now, keep in mind, these are the same GPU with the same memory, so you're not going to see huge differences here, but you will see some. The games that I chose were Cyberpunk 2077, Metro Exodus, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, Far Cry 5, Red Dead Redemption 2, Dirt 5, and Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. Jumping right into Cyberpunk 2077, we got the reference design on the left and the power color Red Devil on the right. The performance metrics on the top of the screen showing you temperature, power draw, frequency, and obviously frame rates. You could pause this at any point and see that there's about a 2 FPS difference between the power color and the reference, with the reference coming out on top. Now, these scenes aren't exact. Cyberpunk does day-night, so they're a little different, but I tried my best. However, I was able to get the built-in benchmark in Shadow of the Tomb Raider to sync up almost perfectly. Now, the metrics at the top of the screen were just shifted over so that when I split the screen in half, you saw the actual performance of each card. Again, reference on the left, power color on the right, and basically the same result as Cyberpunk. You see a 1 to 3 FPS difference depending on where we are in the scene, with the reference card almost universally coming out on top. Not only that, but it is drawing less power and running at a higher speed. This is Far Cry 5, and I find the built-in benchmark here to actually be much more repeatable and provide much more valid data than the built-in benchmark for the newer Far Cry New Dawn. So once again, we are running the side by side, and the top of the screen will show you we're probably getting the same results as we were before. So we have 1 to 3 FPS difference. Sometimes there were some parts of scenes where the Red Devil version was coming out on top. However, for the most part, you're looking at a very, very small advantage for the reference design. Again, drawing less power overall and usually running at a higher clock speed. Here is Metro Exodus, and just like all the rest of the games in our benchmarking suite today, it was run on ultra settings and without enabling any ray tracing or DLSS features at all. Let's do a small and quick experiment here. We're going to pause the video here, we're going to pause the video here, and we're going to pause the video here. Now, I know on the left, the reference frame rates and whatnot might be difficult to read because Metro Benchmark actually has its own metrics running in the background, but at each one of these stops, we see a 1 FPS difference between the reference and the AIB version of the card, with significant power draw increases for the Red Devil versus the reference in every case. Strangely though, the Red Devil card is actually running faster clock speeds than the reference board in 2 out of 3 of our scenarios. Moving on to Red Dead Redemption 2, this was run on the Vulkan API, and honestly at 1440p, just like the rest of our tests, this was running pretty well. It was a pretty enjoyable gameplay experience. Now, this is the built-in benchmark, and you can see although it started in sync, it actually pretty quickly falls out of sync, even though it's not by a whole heck of a lot. But it's okay because we still get a general idea of the performance. We're still within a couple milliseconds of each other as far as where these scenes are rendering. This test was actually the closest overall, as the frame rates were only separated by 0.2 frames per second on average over the course of 3 separate runs of each of them. So effectively, you could say we're dealing with the same speed in Red Dead Redemption 2 with no real fluctuation, even though the clock speeds are a little bit different for each card. Dirt 5 is a pretty cool new racing title. I haven't really played a whole heck of a lot of it except to do these benchmarking runs. It is an AMD sponsored game, and as a result, a lot of times when you're seeing AMD versus Nvidia cards and they include this test, this will be one of the outliers where the AMD cards are vastly outperforming their Nvidia counterparts. We are seeing good performance here at, again, 1440p, but the disparity between the reference card and the AIB card is actually pretty stark here. Most of these scenes you're seeing 3 to 5 frames per second difference between the two, whereas the other games you're usually looking at between 1 and 3. Now, I guess that doesn't sound like a whole lot, but when you're looking for significant differences between the same silicon and same memory, 5 frames per second is actually pretty significant. And then the last test that I ran was Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. Same settings as all the other games, 1440p and Ultra with no ray tracing or DLSS, and as we get into this intro scene here, you can see the frame rates drop quite a bit down into the mid 30s and kind of stick there throughout this whole scene. This isn't a terribly great experience, especially in a fast-paced shooter. So for this game, likely you're looking at 1080p gaming as opposed to 1440p. Still though, these cards are running almost the same here. And we have reached yet again the end of another benchmarking session and GPU comparison. And what conclusions can we draw? Well, as per usual, the value in an AIB card comes from the cooler design and usually the power delivery. Now, I didn't do any overclocking here, and that's certainly something that you could make an argument for boosts the value of a card like the Red Devil. But just looking at what you get out of the box, the Power Color card very surprisingly performed worse than the reference design when it comes to just frame rates. But when you take it in context, you're talking about such small differences that likely the difference in thermals, the difference in noise, and the difference in aesthetics probably outweighs the marginal performance gains you're going to get from the reference card. After all, you're just talking a couple of frames per second per title, and in some games it was almost the same. I was very surprised to see that the Power Color card was outperformed by this guy right here. That was a shock to me. But at the same time, again, we're within the realm where it's fine. It's not really going to make a huge difference to your experience. Now, as far as what you get for your money, we don't really know. Again, I don't know the MSRP of this card, and that's really going to play heavily into, is the better acoustics and better thermals worth it for, let's say this was $10 more. That's certainly worth it. If it was $20 more, $30 more, $100 more, at what point does the additional cost offset the benefits that you get from an AIB card like this? That's really up to you to decide, but a lot of times you have people who are going to really not care what the card sounds like in their case because they game with headphones on, or they're really not going to care what the card looks like because it's under their desk. And in that case, you just strictly want the card that performs better, and I guess that's this guy. And that's a little surprising, but I guess that's where we are right now in product cycles, where both AMD and NVIDIA are putting out really decent reference cooler designs. Just a couple years ago, they all sucked. You had blower cards that ran hot, ran slow, and nobody really wanted them unless you were going to water cool them. But that seems to have changed, and I think these board partners are going to see AMD and NVIDIA putting out more and better cards as the years go on because they just have an inherent advantage. They have this silicon and this board layout in-house for years while they're working on the design, and that should allow them the time to properly develop a cooler that works for that card. If you guys aren't familiar, when it comes to a product launch like this, these AIB partners usually don't get the silicon till probably a couple weeks before these cards start coming out. That's not a whole heck of a lot of time, and they kind of have to fall back on their prior design in order to get something to market within a reasonable period. So when you think about it like that, yeah, AMD and NVIDIA have a clear advantage. And as long as they keep iterating on these coolers and don't go back to their terrible blower cooler designs of years past, I think we're headed in the right direction, but that might mean bad news for AIBs who, at some point might be priced out of the market. So what do you guys think of the AIB versus reference design? Just that argument alone, not necessarily about GPU availability, although inevitably that's going to be in the comments. Anyway, let me know down below, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video, took something away from it. If so, hit that like button, and I will see you next week.